Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Konstantin Bulatov. I am the Chief Technology Officer at OCR Studio. OCR Studio is a company dedicated to the development of secure ID scanning solutions. And today, we are going to talk to you about how eIDAS shapes digital identity processes in Europe, and more specifically, what it means for identity verification and KYC. eIDAS is not a regulation about KYC. It covers a much broader set of use cases, including electronic identification, e-signatures, authentication, trust services, things like that. But since we as a company work with identity verification and ID document processing, we will focus on KYC as the most practical and relevant example. And also we use the term KYC here in a broader sense. So, because in practice, it's not just about new user onboarding. Whenever you need to verify a person, whether it's an account opening, registration, access to a service, or even age verification, you are essentially solving the same problem. You need to understand who the user is. We'll look at eIDAS through the lens of real identity verification systems, the kind of systems that you are building and working with as our audience. And as digital onboarding becomes more standardized across Europe, it becomes equally important how exactly identity data is processed inside these systems. In this webinar, we will look at an on-premise approach to this problem. We will show that identity verification can be built in a way where sensitive user data does not need to be transferred for processing. It does not need to be stored outside of the user's own device. And we will evaluate how this approach aligns with eIDAS requirements. What is eIDAS? eIDAS stands for Electronic Identification, Authentication and Trust Services. It is a European regulation that defines how citizens, businesses, and authorities have to interact with each other in the digital environment across the EU. Before eIDAS, the situation was quite fragmented. Each country had its own identity systems, legal requirements, technical standards, and as a result, cross-border digital interactions were difficult, unnecessarily difficult, inconsistent, and in many cases not reliable enough from a technical standpoint or from a legal standpoint. To solve this problem, the European Commission introduced eIDAS, and it introduced the following things. First, it made electronic identification schemes mutually recognizable across countries, across member states of the EU. This means that if a user is identified using a national ID in one EU country, that identity can be accepted by services in another country. Second, it established a legal framework for trust services, such as electronic signatures, electronic seals, timestamps, registered delivery, website, authentication certificates, and so on. These services now have the same legal effect across all EU member states. And third, eIDAS defined how reliable an identity verification process needs to be through the concept of levels of assurance, each containing a set of standards for electronic identification. These standards are exactly what KYC providers and identity verification vendors need to align with if they want to present themselves as consistent with eIDAS principles. So I mentioned levels of assurance. eIDAS introduced 3 levels of assurance: low, substantial, and high. Each level represents the degree of confidence that a system has in a user's claimed identity. A low level of assurance corresponds to a basic level of confidence. It may be sufficient for low-risk services where the consequences of identity fraud are limited. Substantial level requires stronger identification, stronger verification, reducing the likelihood of identity misuse, and introducing more robust checks. And finally, high level is intended to provide the maximum degree of certainty. It typically involves the strictest requirements designed to minimize the risk of identity fraud as much as possible within the context. What changed in eIDAS 2.0? The updated version of the regulation, eIDAS 2.0, extended the framework with new components. The most important one is the EU Digital Identity Wallet. This wallet is expected to be provided by each EU member state by the end of this year. Its use is not mandatory for citizens, but making it available is mandatory for governments. And the wallet will allow users to store identity data and verified attributes in a digital form. It will enable users to identify themselves online and share specific pieces of information with service providers when needed. So one of the key ideas behind this model is selective data sharing. So instead of providing, for example, full picture of an identity document or the document itself, users will be able to share only the attributes required for a particular service. So imagine, for example, a website wants to access an online service that requires age verification. Before, the process could be structured such that the user should upload a passport or ID or scan it using like a mobile application. The service processes the entire document, all personal data is exposed, even if it's not needed, and all this just to verify the person's age. With the digital identity wallet, the service now could request a single attribute, not even the age of the person, just the answer to the question, is the user over 18? The wallet provides a verified answer, document image is not shared, no extra personal data is exposed. Great. So this really changes the way identity data can be shared between the services which need verification and the trust personal data providers. Instead of exposing full documents, which is the traditional way, services can request only what they need. However, the wallet does not replace identity verification. It only changes how data is delivered, not how it's created or how it's registered or how it's verified by the verification authority. All those attributes, age, name, address, identity details, must first be collected, verified, and issued in the wrong order by a trusted authority. And in many cases, they also need to be updated over time. So while the wallet simplifies interaction between services, it does not eliminate the need for KYC. So even in a wallet-based model, identity verification does not disappear. Documents still exist, real-world identity still needs to be verified, and personal data is still involved in the process of verification. And this is exactly where the question of system design becomes critical. So even highly trusted institutions, which are supposed to, for example, provide the actual source data for the digital wallets, are not immune to data breaches. Today is 23rd of April. Just 3 days ago, there was an incident involving ANTS. It's National Agency of Secure Documents, the official French government agency responsible for issuing identity documents, identity cards, driving licenses, all these kinds of national documents. Security breach reportedly affected up to 10 million accounts, exposing personal data such as names, dates of birth, contact details. This is not a failure of regulation, It is a consequence of the underlying technical architecture. Some may even say that it's an inevitable consequence of centralized services handling sensitive data. As long as data is transferred and stored, it remains a target. That is why we believe that the future of KYC is decentralization, relying on on-premise or on-device identity verification. Instead of trying to better protect sensitive data at every stage of its life cycle, it reduces the need to handle that data at all. Identity verification is performed locally on the user's device without transmitting or storing personal data externally. It is best to show this in practice. So let me demonstrate it using the demo application, which is developed by OCR Studio. So first of all, to emphasize that all relevant computation which I'm going to perform are performed on device, I am switching off the airplane mode. So everything which will happen solely on the mobile device. So I can select ID card, and then my job is to enter and verify the identity document. So I'm just shooting the document, and in the video stream, it quickly can extract all the relevant information which it sees on the document and perform checks to spot possible fraud, which here there is fraud because first of all it doesn't have a hologram because it's a printout, and also it's a known specimen document which is actually part of the German law. So only by using the software developed by OCR Studio, you can perform the document data entry, document ID scanning, and verification completely on device without having to send this information to external services. That is the point. And also because this question sometimes comes up, the data is not shared with the application as well, because this application doesn't do anything. It just serves the purpose of me showing to you what this functionality does. The product of OCR Studio is a module, software module, completely autonomous, which works offline, which can be integrated directly inside your service, inside your mobile application, inside your desktop application, inside your backend service system, and provide you the ability to verify these documents without having to send it over the network and exposed in any other way. So the principle of on-device operation, principle of on-device ID scanning and verification is not just a technological preference which we have in OCR Studio. This approach is actually fully aligned with the direction defined by eIDAS requirements. So let's go through the main requirements which are stated in the eIDAS. Actually, version 1, the version 2.0 did not change these requirements. The regulation states that electronic communication channels used to exchange personal or sensitive information are protected against eavesdropping, manipulation, and replay. This requirement is focused on the moment when data is being transmitted. Whenever personal information moves between systems through any kind of channels, it becomes vulnerable. It can be intercepted, altered, reused in fraudulent scenarios. That is why traditional architectures invest heavily in encryption, secure transport protocols, channel protection, etc. But all of this exists for one reason, because the data is being transferred. If identity verification is performed directly on the user's device, there is no need to transmit personal data to external service, and the technologies make it possible to perform scanning directly on the user's smartphone, tablet, or desktop in real time, removing the need to exchange the data with external service. This means no data in transit, no communication channels carrying sensitive information, significantly reduced risk of interception or manipulation. So instead of securing the channel, the on-device approach reduces the need for the channel itself and thus still provides you a solution which is compliant to the eIDAS requirements. Next, eIDAS states that all media containing personal, cryptographic, or other sensitive information are stored, transported, and disposed of in a safe and secure manner. This includes everything related to identity verification, document images, extracted personal data as well, and any associated sensitive information. Here again, the regulation assumes that data is collected, stored, possibly transferred between systems, and it requires that all these stages are properly secured. With an on-premise approach, the life cycle becomes shorter, because if processing happens locally, document images do not need to be uploaded, and extracted data, it is uploaded as in any other kind of system. So you still need to have a secure transport protocol for the extracted data, but document images do not need to be uploaded. Again, reduced need to transport sensitive information between systems, and we are still aligning with the eIDAS principles. Next, eIDAS requires that systems collect the relevant identity data required for identity proofing and verification. So again, systems should not collect excessive data, only what is necessary for a specific verification task. This principle is closely related to data minimization. The less data you collect, the lower the risk associated with processing it, and so the risk of misuse. In practice, however, identity verification often starts again with the full document image or video interaction of the person with the document. And once that image is transmitted or stored, it can expose significantly more data than is actually required for the task. So if processing is performed locally, this problem is addressed at a different level, only at the level of extracted data. Even if full document is captured and processed on device, the image does not need to be transmitted to external systems. This means there is no risk of exposing additional data beyond what is required within the process, assuming that the process is known. For example, if the goal is age verification, again, as a very minimal data, the example requiring minimal data, the system can identify the date of birth field, determine whether the user missed the requirement, without having to transmit the full ID document and full passport picture, for example, and exposing all the other personal data which is visible on this document. Next key requirement is that the person can be assumed to be the legitimate holder of the identity evidence. So it is not enough just to check the document itself and that the document looks valid. You also need to confirm that the person presenting it is the rightful owner. In practice, this is typically done through selfie to ID checks by comparing the presenter's selfie with the ID photo. Biometric data is captured on the device, sent to a server, processed remotely, sometimes stored. This creates an additional layer of risk because biometric data is among the most sensitive types of personal information. It's quite easy to change your passport, not that easy to change your face. So with on-device architecture, we can perform the same verification locally. Face matching happens on the user's device. Liveness is checked in real time. Biometric data does not leave the device, doesn't have to leave the device. So again, the requirement is fulfilled, but without introducing additional exposure layer. Okay, next. eIDAS also requires that the evidence must be genuine, valid, and appear to be authentic or verifiable against authoritative sources. To meet this requirement, you must be able to assess whether the document presented by the user appears genuine and valid. This is about detecting fake documents, tampering, expired IDs, inconsistencies in the presented data, all this. So our on-device solutions enable such checks by combining ID scanning and recognition with what is called document forensics technologies. So based on even a single document photo or a video stream, they can detect substituted fields and substituted photos, masked data blocks, composited image fragments, injected foreign elements, as well as recently deepfakes and AI-generated and morphed IDs. We can also check validity periods, cross-validate data from the visual inspection zone, machine visible zone, and NFC chip. And with this cross-comparison, we can identify inconsistencies that may indicate tampering or fraud. Next, eIDAS requires that providers comply with legal requirements related to identity proofing, data handling, and processing. So this includes what data can be collected, how it is processed, how long it is retained, and how it is protected. For most systems, this becomes an ongoing operational challenge. Ensuring storage policies, securing infrastructure, managing data lifecycle, all this, continuously adapting to regulatory changes. So our on-premise system, again, that is why we are really pushing and focusing on on-premise and on-device solutions, implies that this kind of compliance should be universal and simplified. Because data is not transmitted, storage is minimized or eliminated in some cases, and processing happens locally, many regulatory risks are reduced by design, not by additional controls and additional processes and additional procedures. Such a system is compatible not only with EU regulations like eIDAS and GDPR, but also with any Asian, Middle Eastern, Northern Africa, Latin American, other data privacy frameworks, because a lot of countries now introduce new regulation regarding data locality or personal data protection. There is one special kind of requirement which by its formulation requires data transfer, or at least on the first glance. The regulation states that systems must retain and protect records for the purpose of auditing and investigation of security breaches and ensure their secure destruction afterwards, presumably after the investigation. So it is not about storing personal data per se. It's about ensuring that systems remain auditable, that if something goes wrong, there is a way to understand what happened. In other words, the system must maintain a certain level of logging and traceability. This is a valid and necessary requirement. Any real-world system needs to support incident investigation and accountability. At the same time, it introduces an architectural challenge. How do you design a system where identity data is protected locally, but auditability is still preserved? This is not a contradiction, it's rather a design challenge that needs to be solved carefully. In our view, the key principle remains the same. Data should not be transferred for processing. On-device processing of data for identity verification does not contradict the auditability. You still can store the necessary data to reproduce the process. So you still can store the data required for incident investigation after the fact. But these data retention could be controlled only for audit purposes and only in a restricted and limited and secure way. This is where future approaches will likely evolve. For example, selective logging, encryption-based audit records, even more advanced mechanisms that allow auditability without exposing raw personal data. So In our view, this is not a limitation of an on-device model. It is a broader challenge for the next generation of identity verification systems. But what it doesn't contradict is the principle of fully on-device ID data processing and identity scanning and identity verification. That's all for eIDAS requirements. You might think that on-device verification requires some kind of compute context, so requires a mobile application, for example. However, even in web requirements, even in web environments, processing can still happen on the user's side, even if you don't have a mobile application, if you don't have a native kind of application. And again, you might assume that this would be a lighter, less capable alternative compared to native application, but in practice, this is not the case. WebAssembly technology allows us to achieve near native performance while keeping the entire process fully on device. And this is exactly why we call it web native OCR. It combines the accessibility of web applications with the performance and execution model of native solutions. So from the user's perspective, nothing changes. They simply interact with your service in a browser, in a mobile browser or in a desktop browser. But from a data processing perspective, everything still happens locally on their device. So again, let me show it to you. I will still show it on the mobile device. I'm opening the demo page of our web native OCR technology. Let me select, for example, the ID documents of Qatar. So it asks me for access to the camera, obviously, and then I can capture the data of the identity document, basically as in the native application, also in a real-time video stream, and extracts all the relevant information, the photo, the rectified picture of the document, and all the fields which it sees, numeric fields, fields written in English and in Arabic. And again, during this process, no images left the device. Instead, the web page downloaded the compute module inside the device itself, and then all processing happened on device. This is the difference between the web native scenario and the scenario where the web browser only serves as a front end for capturing frames. As you can see from the requirements we have discussed, on-premise approach is not only compatible with the framework of eIDAS, it aligns with it at every step. On-premise and on-device technologies fully meet the key eIDAS requirements while avoiding its fundamental challenge, the exposure of sensitive data through storage and transmission. Because data is processed locally, the risk surface is significantly reduced by design rather than by additional layers of protection and controls. So today, KYC systems, which rely on data transmission and centralized processing, are the current state of the art. And on-device verification, in our opinion, will be the future of this space. We believe that strictly on-device verification is not only compatible with eIDAS, it is the most natural way to implement these principles. That's it for today from me. Now we are ready for our Q&A. If you have any questions, you can either raise your hand and ask it vocally, or you can leave it in the chat, or there is a dedicated question and answer chat. You showed document authenticity checks in the mobile demo, but not in the web demo. Can't you do that in the browser? Yes, sure. When I showed the mobile application demo, I showed you the internal development demo, which actually has the fraud attempt detection functionality. It's not limited to the native mobile application. However, the web demo is public, and all our public demos will never show you the actual functionality of fraud attempts, because that would give the fraudsters the tool to train their methods of circumventing the fraud checks. So yeah, when I showed you the mobile application, it had the fraud attempts enabled. The web demo which I showed is actually online right now. You can test it yourself. You just need to go to demo.ocrstudio.ai and you can test it again fully yourself. However, the fraud attempts will not be available in a public demo. It can be available in a private demo or the trial stage, for example, if you contact our sales team. But no, there is no limitation. Everything we can do on the mobile device, we can do on the web as well, and vice versa. We have another question. In many KYC scenarios, you also need, yes. In many KYC scenarios, you also need to check users against sanction lists and PEP database, politically exposed persons databases. Doesn't that require sending personal data anyway? Yes, it does require sending personal data, but in the same way as the verification requires sending the actual answer of verification, the extracted data, to the party which requires an answer. So here again, the principle of selective sharing can be applied. So instead of sending the document image, for example, for processing in order to then extract the data required to do a database lookup, you need only to transmit the limited information required for this lookup and then do the lookup on the server side, for example. So the point of the product is to perform the compute-intensive identity verification and cross-verification with the selfie, for example, and performing face liveness and document authenticity check on the side of the device, and only transmit the absolutely required information for the continuation of the process. So yeah, but thank you for the question. I think I completely missed the database lookups and PEP databases aspect of the KYC in the presentation. So thank you very much for your questions. You can always send the message through our website and ask your question after the fact as well. So on the slide, you can see the coordinates where you can get in touch with us and links to our demo application. So there are 3 main demo applications. First, there is a native iOS application called OCR Studio, available in App Store. The same application is available in Google Play Store for Android, also called OCR Studio. And there you can see all the functionality, all the countries and document types which are supported by our engine, and test it, and also verify that everything which we do is fully offline by putting on airplane mode, for example, before testing it. Finally, I already quoted demo.ocrstudio.ai, so you can access our web native OCR demo. And right now, I won't be able to quote you what functionality right now the demo presents, but we are currently expanding the demo as well and adding support for new documents and new countries to the public web native OCR demo. Finally, you can also meet us in person at upcoming industry events in 2026, including GITEX Europe, which will happen at the end of June, start of July in Berlin. Seamless Middle East 2026, which will happen at the end of September in Dubai. And AI Everything Global, again 2026, which will happen in the start of October in Abu Dhabi. Thank you very much for joining us with our webinar. See you next time.